fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, the podcast where we talk everything National Football League in season, off season. It does not matter because it is football. I am your host, Double Diesel, and welcome back to this wild card weekend recap of the 2023-2024 NFL playoffs. Like always, before we dive into the show, I'd like to ask you, if you've not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoy this content or know anybody that would enjoy this kind of content. Helps boost the exposure of the channel, get us out to more eyeballs. So if you've not done so already and you'd like to, that'd be greatly appreciated to me. Also, if you've not done so already, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. And link to that will be in the description down below. But let's get on with the show. Wildcard weekend is in the books, and from a game perspective, a lot of blowouts, a lot of one-sided affairs, not the most exciting games to happen with the exception of one. But boy, oh boy, we had a lot of fun narratives coming out of this week that I am really, really excited to talk about. Let's just go straight into it. First playoff game of the season was the Cleveland Browns heading to Houston to take on the Houston Texans in a game that, again, coming into the season, who had this playoff matchup on their bingo card predictions? Who would have thought that the Cleveland Browns, led by Joe Flacco, would be going to Houston to take on rookie C.J. Stroud, coached by rookie head coach DeMeco Ryans, in a wild card playoff game. And the game at first looked like it was going to be a shootout. It looked like it was going to be a fun game, both teams throwing haymakers back and forth. And then CJ Stroud turned into CJ Stroud, essentially. 274 yards in this game, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Nico Collins made some big plays in this game. Brevin Jordan had a long 76-yard catch and run touchdown. The defense for the Texans were on clamps, and the Flacco-sance, it was fun while it lasted. We'll say that. I expected the Browns to put up much more of a fight in the second half than they ended up giving. And the one thing that I noticed, because Flacco turning the ball over at the rate he did in this game, I mean, he threw essentially back-to-back interceptions, or back-to-back pick sixes rather, in this game. And it was a question of what happened, because Flacco was on a roll. He got this team competitive. This offense was being really productive with Flacco and a quarterback. Well, the one thing that we failed to realize, or at least I failed to realize, and what a lot of people during this Linsanity run almost failed to realize, was this was not a new thing for Joe Flacco. He had actually been turning the ball over at an alarming rate, but because the offense looked so good and he looked so good, considering that he was a 40-year-old quarterback that was brought in off the couch, and they were winning games, we just sort of ignored all the blatant turnovers that he was committing during that stretch. So in theory, it shouldn't have been surprising, but it was in the moment. And all of a sudden, a game that looked really competitive turned into a one-sided affair very quickly. And the Browns, this number one ranked defense for the Cleveland Browns, had no answer for CJ Stroud and the Texans offense. They could not stop them worth a damn. And just the thought of not just CJ Stroud, a rookie quarterback in his first ever playoff game, putting up the performance that he did, and this Texans team that is incredibly young, putting up the performance that they did in this game, really was a sight to behold. And they head into Baltimore next week, a team that they lost to back in week 1 earlier this year. But it should be an interesting game because this is not the same Texans team that played the Ravens in week 1, and this damn sure is not the same CJ Stroud that the Ravens played in week 1. But seeing a young quarterback, a rookie quarterback, the question was, is this spotlight going to be too bright for him in his first ever playoff game? And it wasn't. He never once was flustered. And his performance in many ways was very reminiscent of another quarterback that we will be talking about later on in this show. But yeah, the Linsanity-esque run of Joe Flacco and the Cleveland Browns come to an end. And now it's all downhill here for the Cleveland Browns because guess what? They have no choice. They have to go back to Deshaun Watson next year, which you can imagine this game probably stung for him more than anything else. Seeing his old team that he wanted out of desperately and seeing them with a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach not just win this playoff game, but win it in such dominating fashion. Honestly, couldn't have happened to a better person, if we're being completely honest. But yeah, the magical run comes to an end for the Cleveland Browns. Texans season and their improbable season lives on for another week, and who knows how they'll perform against Baltimore in Baltimore. I believe on Saturday is when the game is. But that is all my thoughts on that particular game. Next game was a game that was, again, pretty much a one-sided affair. Miami against Kansas City. A game that was at kickoff 23 degrees below zero with wind chill factored in. It was frigid at Arrowhead Stadium. God bless the people that actually paid to go to that game. I think if I remember during the broadcast, they said that tickets were like at $20, which thank God, because imagine paying hundreds of bucks to go to freeze your ass off for over 3 hours. So Arrowhead Stadium did the smart thing in that regard. But, and also one more thing before we actually talk about the game itself and the aftermath of this game. Why are we putting games behind a paywall? Why are we putting playoff games, no less? It's one thing to do it with regular season games. Why are we putting playoff games behind a subscription service that you have to pay in order to see? People, because I have Peacock. I already had Peacock. It's how I watch the Sunday Night Football games. Outside of that, and outside of the WWE stuff that's also on there, because I'm also a big wrestling fan, outside of that stuff, Peacock doesn't have anything worth a shit watching, at least for me. I only watch it for football and wrestling, and that's it. And I can imagine for most people, it's even less. There's not really much things worth a damn watching on Peacock. So, having people, or forcing people rather, to pay this, and I don't know if there's a free trial. I don't remember when I bought my Peacock subscription if there was actually a free trial. I don't remember doing a free trial for it. So, forcing people to pay for this, knowing that they're just going to end up canceling it immediately after, is just really stupid to me. And I'm in favor of just letting people access the game freely. And then to watch them the following night during Rams Lions, which is a game we'll talk about later. Watching them sort of like NBC and Peacock give themselves some bullshit like pat on the back and give this whole graphic of, look at the viewership numbers. We had 23 million people tune in for this stream and all this stuff. And then they're fucking giving themselves a round of applause. Whoop-de-fucking-do. The game was boring. It wasn't fun to watch. Congratulations, Peacock. Here's your fucking petty snaps, your petty claps. You want a fucking cookie now? It's just really dumb, in my opinion. It's just really goddamn dumb. But let's talk about the game itself. Like I said, it was relatively boring. Not a whole lot of offense going on. Then again, you were kind of expecting that. You weren't expecting a fire show in basically the frozen Arrowhead's version of the frozen tundra. But yeah, Miami couldn't do anything worth a damn. But let's talk about Kansas City first, because they still have a wide receiver problem. For any wide receiver that isn't named Rashee Rice. And I was dead wrong about Rashee Rice. I did not like him at all coming out of SMU. I thought he was an overhyped guy who was a jump ball possession receiver, and that was it. I could not have been more wrong. He is a much more explosive after the catch threat than I ever thought he could be. And he's the only reliable piece in the passing game on this entire Kansas City offense. And that includes Travis Kelce. He is the one thing keeping this offense being functional from a pass game standpoint. And if they lost him at any point, you know they would be absolutely fucked. So, and the defense was still just as good as ever. They stopped the Dolphins offense from doing anything. The only score from Miami in this game came from a long Tyreek Hill touchdown. Other than that, Miami couldn't do a damn thing. And that's pretty much all there is to say about the Kansas City Chiefs. But let's talk about these goddamn Fins. There is no team, and there will be a little bit of bias when I say this. There is no team in all of football that I personally hate more than the Miami Dolphins. I cannot stand those goddamn Fins from South Beach, bro. I cannot stand them worth a shit. I hated them back from the prime years when we had Tom Brady, when we were in championships, we were winning championships constantly. We would rout teams constantly. Every game would just be a blowout win in favor of us. But then whenever we went to Miami, we just couldn't get our shit together for whatever fucking reason. My hatred for them started from there. And then it's just festered over time, from the Miami Miracle to them beating us in Week 17 in 2019. A loss at home that cost us a chance at a first-round bye that resulted in that being Tom Brady's last game being a playoff game, where his last pass as a Patriot was a pick six in a wild card loss at home. You had the fucking Miami Dolphins to thank for that. So I hate this team more than anything. So I'm just giving that as I'm throwing it out there to let you know that there is some personal bias when I'm saying all this. But that doesn't make what I'm about to say any less factual. These Miami Dolphins have got to be one of, if not the most, overhyped team in all of football. This is a team, for the second consecutive year now, where they start out hot. Second year in a row with Mike McDaniel coming in as head coach, and I'll talk about him later, where they start the year out 8-3. They're on a hot streak. The offense is on a roll. All the shebang. They're 8-3 going into December, and then they just completely hit a wall or fall off a cliff. In last year in 2022, they started out 8-3 and then lost 5 of their last 6 games to limp into the playoffs and then lose in Buffalo. And a game where they shockingly almost won with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, which just made Tua's case all that worse. All the worse, I should say. And it was the same story this year. They started out 8-3. They finished the year 3-3. They had the division all but gift wrapped for them, only to then piss it away in the final game of the season in an embarrassing loss at home to the Buffalo Bills. A Bills team that in the middle of the season was left for dead after Thanksgiving. You lost the division title to those Bills. And that resulted in them having to go to Kansas City in freezing temperatures. And then after the game, everyone is bitching. People are complaining. Dolphins fans, the organization itself are complaining of, man, if only we played in Miami. If only the game was in Miami, we would have won. If only the game was in Miami, it would have been more competitive. Really? Because where was the game in Week 18 that I just talked about? I think if you remember correctly, I said that game was in Miami. And you want to talk about, man, if we only won the division, if only we got the chance to play a home playoff game. Here's an idea. If you wanted to play a home playoff game so badly, and you felt like you would have had a better chance if you played the game in Miami, then maybe don't score only 14 points in a game with the division title on the line against the Bills defense that was made out of Scotch tape and butter. Maybe don't go into Baltimore and get absolutely demolished and have the Ravens teabag your corpse for the whole world to see. Maybe don't blow a double-digit lead to a Titans team in the final 2 minutes of the game on primetime, to a Titans team that had nothing to play for. If you didn't want to play on the road so badly, and you wanted to play in Miami so badly in the postseason, don't let any of those things I just said happen. This team is frustrating. That they're so cocky. It's almost the arrogance that if they assumed that if the game was in Miami, that they would have won. Even though 2 of their last 3 losses were in Miami, and both of those games should have been cakewalks for them. But it wasn't. It wasn't, and they have nobody else to blame but themselves. And if I see Mike McDaniel for all of next year do another bullshit press conference where he does another bullshit joke, I'm going to lose my fucking mind. Because everybody likes Mike McDaniel because he's funny. He's the bro. He's the guy that vaped in the middle of a fucking playoff game last year. But we need to see, and this is a serious question. I'm throwing this out there. It's a legitimate, serious question. If next year ends up being the exact same script of you start out hot, then you hit a wall once December rolls around, and you limp into the postseason where you get one and done. If it's a third straight year of that happening, should Mike McDaniel lose his job? And most people would sit there and say, no, that's ridiculous. His job is as safe as anybody in the NFL. Are you sure? Because I'm now noticing a pattern here. I'm noticing a trend here. And people will use Tua as the scapegoat. And Tua is also at fault. Tua is not the guy. I think this is proven that Tua is not the guy that's going to lead you to a championship. I've been on that train. But Mike McDaniel needs to seriously get some criticism here. Because, okay, you are known as this mad scientist on offense. This guy that knows all the levers. He's created all the levers. And yet, this is year 2 now with all these weapons. And yet, once you get into the part of the season where the games matter most, all of a sudden that high-powered offense can't do shit? Why is that a thing? It's something to consider. It's something to throw out there. And if it does happen, if this same script plays out in 2024 and Mike McDaniel gets fired, everybody will probably be shocked. I wouldn't. Because I would sit here, and if that day comes and it happens again, I'm going to sit here on this very day next year in 2025 and be like, I fucking told you so. That is all I'm going to say about that. But let's move on to some of these other games, okay? Let's move on to another game that I really want to talk about that had a lot of talking points coming from it. Probably the most out of any of these games. And that is the 7th-seeded Green Bay Packers kicking the ever-living shit out of the Dallas Cowboys. Final score of this game was 48-32. Trust me, folks, if you watch this game was not as close as that score may have shown it to be. This game for the Green Bay Packers, I don't know if they could have played a more perfect game. This was a game where Jordan Love showed that he is a legit top 10 quarterback in football. Honestly, Jordan Love, I mean, this is the same Jordan Love that played like an MVP candidate from week 11 onwards. From week 11 to week 18, he had 19 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. And then he comes into this game against a Dallas Cowboys team that was undefeated at home and just did whatever he wanted. 3 touchdown passes, no interceptions, 272 yards passing. Him and CJ Stroud's stat line was identical, with the exception of Stroud having 2 more passing yards. It was a masterclass. It was just an absolute masterclass. And seeing all these young guys that the Packers have drafted over the years, for the past 2 years rather, Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs being draft picks last year, Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave and Dontavian Wicks being rookies this year. This is a ridiculously young team. All playing in their first ever playoff game. And none of them looked like they were fazed by the moment. They looked like they had been there before. And that's the scary thing. Is that, you know, some people would say, like, they're so young that they have no fear. That they're not afraid of the things that they're supposed to be afraid of because they don't know they're supposed to be afraid of it yet. This is a team that doesn't know that they're supposed to be intimidated by the moment. They're a team that doesn't know they're supposed to be intimidated walking in as a 7th seed into the house of a 2 seed that has been undefeated at home all year. and has steamrolled teams at home all year. They're so young that they don't know they're supposed to be intimidated by that. And they just dominated. This game was over by the middle of the second quarter. They were up 27-0 at one point with 2 minutes left to go in the second quarter. They were up 48-16 going into the fourth rather. There was still like 2 minutes left in the third quarter, and they had just scored to go up 48-16. It was a sight to behold. And this team is now going to walk into San Francisco, and a lot of people are expecting San Francisco to just walk all over them. I don't think it's going to be that easy. I think the Packers are going to give them a run for their money, and the 49ers have historically been the Packers' bugaboo in the postseason for years now. But this just feels like a different Packers team, man. This is not an Aaron Rodgers-led Packers team. This is a Jordan Love-led Packers team, and he has a chance to rewrite that narrative. And I'm excited to see what this team looks like next week against San Francisco. But now, let's have some fun. Let's have some fun talking about... Actually, let me just say this. How about them Cowboys? Wow, dude. This is one of the most stunning single game postseason collapses I've ever seen a team have. A team that was completely undefeated at home all season with a home playoff game against the 7th seed, a seed that has never won in the postseason before, and they got dog walked. Dak Prescott, who was an MVP candidate for a good portion of the year, was embarrassed. CeeDee Lamb, who was an Offensive Player of the Year candidate, didn't do a damn thing. This defense, coached by Dan Quinn, who was a head coach considered a serious head coaching candidate, couldn't get a single stop all game against the Green Bay Packers. And what makes it even more laughable is I, along with everybody else, said, that's it. Mike McCarthy is going to be fired. Instead, the Cowboys rub a little more salt in the wound. They kick their fans in the dick just a little bit harder when news breaks today that will not be the case. They're going to be retaining Mike McCarthy for the 2024 season. Which means we're going to have to be playing this tune again for 2025. At this time, rather, next year in 2025. Excuse me. But this loss now makes it, I don't even know how many years now. I think it's 26 consecutive years of making the playoffs where the Dallas Cowboys, the Dallas Cowboys, I'll put it this way, because I don't know, I'm not the best at math. I don't know exactly how many years it's been. I do know it's been 1995. It has been since 1995. 1995, rather, was the last time that the Dallas Cowboys made it past the divisional round. Since 1995, the Cowboys have posted a postseason record of 5-13. And have not made it past the divisional round once. since 1995. You're talking a team that's won their division multiple times. It's gotten the opportunity to play at Jerry World multiple times. In old Cowboys Stadium before they demolished that. Most years they get one and done. The team that gets more media attention than any other team in football for decades now. America's team. The team that always gets shoved in our face on primetime every single year. Whether it's warranted or not. Cannot perform when the postseason rolls around. And it sounds weird to say it, but the Dallas Cowboys, a team that gets most media attention of any other franchise in football over the past 30 years, cannot perform when the lights are on. It's weird. It's a weird thing, and it's not just this current iteration of the Cowboys. It was when Tony Romo was here. I say here, but like in sense of the Cowboys. When Tony Romo was there, when T.O. was there, when Dez was there, when they had all these superstar talents for years, whenever the postseason rolled around, whenever the lights shined the brightest and the pressure was mounting, they just shut down. It's weird and it's fucking hilarious. And now the questions that we thought were over, as far as Dak Prescott, a guy who was in the MVP race for a good portion of the year. They get embarrassed in this game against Green Bay, and now we're right back to the question that we thought was settled forever, which was, is Dak the true franchise quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys? Can Dak Prescott get this team over the hump and get this team a Super Bowl championship? We thought that question was settled, and here we are, we're right back to asking that question again. And I still don't know. That's the thing. It's like we see him, we know he's good. We see him that he's good. He puts up the numbers showcasing that he's good. But yet, when the lights shine the brightest, he just doesn't perform. The whole team doesn't perform. And it really is a matter of, what can you do? And there's one simple answer to why this team, why this franchise have been failing and falling. The blame falls on Jerry Jones. The fish rots from the head at the end of the day. He's the guy that always tries to insert himself in player personnel and coaching decisions. He's the guy that has been notorious for holding on to coaches for too long, for holding on to quarterbacks way too long. He's the reason why this franchise has failed constantly. Notice how the Super Bowls, because Jimmy challenged him. Jimmy got all the credit, and Jerry didn't like that. Jerry wants this team to win, but only if he gets the credit. He wants this team to go far in the playoffs, but only if he's the one that gets credit. That's why the thought of him, if they did fire McCarthy and bringing in someone like Bill Belichick, never just really sat well, or was realistic, because you knew that if Belichick got this team over the hump and won a Super Bowl, that Bill would get the credit, and that's what Jerry doesn't want. He wants to be the star of the star. And he's going to be the reason that this team will never reach its full potential. He'll be the reason. And he will never admit that. But everybody knows it. That's all there is to say about the Dallas Cowboys. Now, let's talk about a game that I was really excited for. I can imagine many people were really excited for. And thankfully, It was a game that lived up to the hype. It was the only really close game on the entire weekend. And that was the Rams heading to Detroit to take on the Detroit Lions. And just I imagine that place was rocking. You can hear it through the TV that it was loud as shit. I can only imagine what it was like in Ford Field for that game. They booed the fuck out of Matthew Stafford, which I don't fully blame them for. I know a lot of people are giving Lions fans shit for that. I don't have an issue with it because it's like, hey, it's the playoffs. If this was the regular season, it might be a different thing, but this is the playoffs. You're talking about a franchise that hasn't won a playoff game in 32 years. I don't give a fuck who you are. I don't give a fuck what you've done for the organization. You're the enemy, and we're here to beat you. So I don't mind Lions fans' reaction to the game or Stafford in this game. But speaking of Stafford, speaking of Jared Goff, I don't remember the last time I saw a game where both quarterbacks were as perfect as both Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford were in this game. Both of those guys played exceptional games. They really did. For the Rams, Puka Nacua went absolutely off. He had 9 catches for $181 and a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Lions came up big with some key plays, including the huge 2nd and 10 play right out of the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter that sealed this game up. And yeah, man, both of these teams just looked incredible offensively. They both made big plays defensively when they needed to. It was one of those games where it was like, damn, it sucks that somebody has to lose this, but there has to be a loser and somebody has to emerge victorious. And that ended up being the Detroit Lions in a game where it was just so fun to watch. And Detroit gets their first playoff win in 32 years. Mobile phones, let alone text messaging, wasn't even a thing yet the last time the Lions won a playoff game. Gen Z wasn't even a thought yet the last time the Lions won a playoff game. Last time the Lions won a playoff game, Barry Sanders was in, if I remember correctly, year 3. That's how long it was the last time the Lions won a playoff game. And it was as magical as you'd expect it to be. There were fans in the stadium crying after the game. They had they had Eminem do a hype video before the game that was awesome. And it was just an incredible scene to watch. And as a result of the Cowboys losing, Detroit's going to get another playoff game in Ford Field next week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we will talk about that game shortly as well. But the Rams, they weren't expected to do much coming into this year, so they had a phenomenal year. They only have a bright future ahead of them. And the Lions, their season lives on, and they look incredible. Jared Goff looked incredible. How can you imagine he felt? Everyone's talking about Stafford and his return to Detroit. But remember, Goff was in that deal that sent Matthew Stafford to the Rams. You know, the Rams gave up on him. So this was a big game for him as well. And this game meant a lot to him, and he played like this game meant a lot to him. So there were just so many storylines around this game, and it was as good as I would hope it would have been. And yeah, man, it was a great game, and Detroit, well-deserved victory, and they move on. Next game that occurred was a game that was actually postponed due to a big blizzard that happened in Buffalo. It was supposed to originally take place on Sunday. It got postponed to 4:30 on Monday, that being Steelers-Bills. Not going to really spend really any time on this game because, honestly, I didn't give a shit about it. I know the Steelers tried to make it a game or an interesting game at points when they had a couple big plays in this game to guys like Deontay Johnson, but other than that, it was a game that it just went as expected. The Bills took care of business against a Steelers team that was missing TJ Watt and had no business being in this spot in the first place. There's really nothing else to add to that. But they were the 2 seed, so they're going to be getting Kansas City for the 3rd time in the postseason in the last few years. But this time they're getting Kansas City in their backyard. So that's going to be really fun. But as far as the actual Steelers-Bills game itself, really nothing to talk about. But real quickly here, because it is getting rather late, and also my computer's about to die soon. Last game, Eagles, Buccaneers. First of all, I'm going to talk about the Bucs. I'm going to be positive first. The Bucs looked incredible. They were making big plays on offense after the catch. That defense looked awesome against the Eagles offense. You know, they were making big plays and key stops, and Todd Bowles was just blitzing the shit out of the Eagles offense on a 3rd down situation. Seemed like every 3rd down he was just sending the fucking house. And Baker looked awesome. He was dialed in. He had over 330 yards passing in this game and 3 touchdown passes. Trey Palmer with a big play in this game, big TD score. And yeah, man, they just looked dialed in. They looked hungry. They looked like they wanted it. They just straight up looked like the better team in this game. And they're going to have their work cut out for them in Detroit next week. But at least for this weekend, they can celebrate a really impressive playoff win. But that's not what people are talking about from this game. People are talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, and not just how they looked in this game, but how they looked really since their big win against the Buffalo Bills. I don't get how a team that started out coming into the year as the runaway Super Bowl favorites coming out of the NFC, who was the NFC champion last year, who nearly won the game last year, started out this season 10-1, who had the number 1 seed in the NFC all but in their grasp, to then finish the year losing 5 of their last 6, limp into the playoffs, and not even reach double-digit points to a 4th-seeded Bucs team that finished the year at 9-8. A Bucs team that they themselves weren't expected to do much coming into the season. How does this happen? This team, collapse doesn't even begin to describe what happened to the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles. I've been talking about this for most of the latter half of the season, in the middle of all this collapse. By the way, I said they lost 5 of their last 6 games. Their one win was on Christmas against a Tyrod Taylor-led New York Giants team. And they nearly lost that game. They nearly blew that game. There was a realistic chance that they could have lost their last 6 games after starting 10-1 and finished the year 10-7. There was a realistic shot that almost happened. They were lucky not to get swept by the Giants, because their last game of the season in Week 18, they went to MetLife Stadium to play the Giants, and they got blown out. They lost. The Giants were up 24-0 at one point in that game with the starters in. The Eagles were playing their starters. And that was the real sign of like, okay, this team's just straight bad. This team isn't even like a good team that's in the middle of like a slump and they're just trying to get out of it. This team's like legit bad now. And this game was like the perfect way this season could have ended. The defense couldn't stop anything worth a shit. I don't know what they were expecting. Yet Sean Desai was not doing a good job, but I don't know how they thought going to Matt Patricia was going to be any kind of upgrade. In fact, you could make the argument the defense got worse. The tackling, this was probably the worst tackling game I've ever seen a team have in a single game. James Bradbury is lucky that he has a job right now. If I were him, I'd move as far away from fuck the city of Philadelphia. If I were him, I'd move far away from the state of Pennsylvania as I possibly could if I were him. That was atrocious. And then offensively, I mean, Cam Jurgens on the offensive line just got fucking bullied in this game. They couldn't do anything in the run game. They only had 15 rushing attempts the entire game. Jalen Hurts couldn't do a goddamn thing. A.J. Brown didn't play. Devonta Smith can only do so much. You were in a situation in the passing game where Jalen Hurts is trying to rely on big plays from Olamide Zaccheaus. And then Jalen just looked like shit. He's looked like shit throughout this entire collapse in the latter half of the season. He took a horrible play on the safety. And everything that I have said about this Eagles team, I've already said, from the humiliating loss at home to the Cardinals. A Cardinals team that was coached by the defensive coordinator that Eagles fans couldn't wait to get rid of. How much you want to bet Eagles fans desperately wish that they had Jonathan Gannon right now? We know damn well that they wish they had Shane Steichen still, and that's probably the biggest one. Losing Shane Steichen crippled this offense. Brian Johnson did a horrible job with this offense all year long. I mean, Brett Coleman a few weeks, like a little over a month ago, Brett Coleman put out a video saying that this looked like a high school offense. And we just assumed that, hey, this is on paper the best roster in the NFL. They're going to be fine. And for a while it did. And we were all saying, like, when this team was 10-1, coming off an impressive win against the Bills, we were like, hey, this is an Eagles team that's 10-1 and they're not even playing their best football yet. Come to find out later on that actually was their best football. They were playing their best football during that stretch. I don't remember ever seeing a team just implode on themselves like this, especially with the team with the roster talent they had, with the expectations they had, with the season they had last year, with the way they started the year. I've never seen a team just completely self-destruct like this. And the fact that that game in Tampa is possibly Jason Kelce's last game. I know they reported that he is officially retiring, that he told his teammates, but then he went on New Heights saying that he's not making anything official yet. But there's a strong chance that that was definitely his last game. And if so, what a fucking horrible way to go out. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer for damn sure. But the fact that this is how his final season's ending in the way it did, I feel so fucking bad for him. Thank God he got a ring in 2017. Otherwise, this would just be horrendous. But there's going to be a lot of talks. They need new coordinators for damn sure. That's a guarantee. They need new coordinators. They have no other choice. And now Nick Sirianni all of a sudden is on the hot seat. Where in the middle of the season that looked like an afterthought. Why would he even be considered to be put on the hot seat? But now it's a serious question of, both coordinators left. He didn't have the answers for the actual coordinators to replace them. And now Nick Sirianni is being looked at as like, okay, what is it that you do here? And Jeffrey Lurie is going to be looking at him like a hawk going into next year. Because Howie Roseman's fine. Howie Roseman, the GM, he did his job. His job was to assemble this team with the best roster talent possible. He did his job. It all falls on Sirianni now. And why Sirianni hasn't gotten the best talent out of this team, or the potential out of this team that we know they're capable of being. It's just a lot of, coming into this year, this is not how you expected the Eagles season to go. It's damn sure not how you expected the Eagles season to end. But they're going to have a lot of questions going into next year. And 2024 is going to be, it's going to be a weird year. Because you're going to get a lot of answers of, is Sirianni the guy, a head coach going forward? There's also probably going to be questions of, is Jalen Hurts the guy going forward? Because all of a sudden, you gave him that big money, you paid him all that money in the offseason, and this year he didn't really pay dividends. He did not even look close to the MVP caliber player that he was last year. There's going to be a lot of questions about this team going forward, but that is going to put a wrap on the video tonight. Like I said, if you have not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you've not done so already. And know anybody that will enjoy this kind of content, to please share it with them. Also, if you want to support the channel financially, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/DoubleDieselSports. The link to that will be in the description down below. But with that being said, I am Double Diesel. Peace.